Hello there, kia ora. You probably saw yesterday a lot of noise about the OCR, the official cash rate, and a lot of will they, won't they talk about the rate changes. It's kind of like the Ross and Rachel of the economics world. And it didn't take long after a change was announced for the government, particularly the Prime Minister, to claim credit. And we all know what that means by now, don't we? Yeah, let me try and explain this in a high level way, because honestly, economics does my head in so much just writing the script for today gave me a headache. So, the OCR and the decisions on it are not simple products. They are more complicated than the plot of Being John Malkovich. Basically, the OCR is the interest rate that banks borrow money from the Reserve Bank Act. That impacts how much banks set interest rates on loans, and everybody gets impacted by that. Your home loan, for example, or your business loan. But then there's also things like the money borrowed by councils to pay for infrastructure. Operational costs for bank services impact things like how much a plumber's going to charge you. It impacts your rates bill, which impacts rents. It impacts operational costs, which will hit you at the pump or the supermarket. The more the Reserve Bank charges, the more it costs everyone down the line, so we spend less, which shrinks the economy, which leads to businesses having to stabilize prices of things you buy, which sets the rate of what we call domestic inflation. But there's also other factors like imported inflation, the cost of things that are bought into the country. The more that costs, the more we pay, and when supply chains are limited, that increases costs. And imported inflation has been the big driver since the start of the pandemic and the war in the Ukraine. We saw supply chains break down, the costs of importing increased, especially on core items like oil-based products. And as those prices increase, spending goes up, which increases inflation. So the OCR is a tool that the Reserve Bank used to limit how much we have to spend to get inflation under control. It's why making thousands of people unemployed is a tool to stop inflation, because people not earning means people not spending. It's the definition of trickle-down economics. Now, one of the markers the Reserve Bank used to make their call yesterday was the stability of those core market products like the price of oil imports. In fact, imported inflation levels are pretty comparable now to where they were before the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. However, domestic inflation is a different story. Actions this government has undertaken has stopped inflation dropping as fast as it should have. Increased costs for councils, for example, as they reintegrate water infrastructure costs, or put money aside for a completely pointless racist Māori ward referenda. For example, those mean that people spend more money on rates and rents. The increased costs of power and ongoing costs like transport registrations, the increased sales of petrol-based vehicles after the cancellation of the clean car discount, and road user charge increases, which means service providers and businesses have to keep their prices up to cover their costs. But because supply chains are pretty much back to pre-pandemic levels and supply is much more consistent, that's one of the biggest drivers for the drop in inflation, which means the Reserve Bank can loosen its grip a little and charge banks a little less. And all this was actually kind of planned a few years ago. And you see, the OCR was set at 5.5 a couple of years back, and the analytics showed that between 2024 and 2025, we'd be at about the point that we are now in terms of inflation rates. It's pretty much returning to normal without the help of the government, but slowed down because of it slightly. But the Prime Minister wants to take credit, and it's fair to say he did actually have a small hand in this. By creating economic policies that have both seen increased domestic spending and massive layoffs across industries, forcing people onto benefits and re-indexing those benefits so beneficiaries have less spending power, that is one element that has helped the Reserve Bank make its decision to lower the rate, since factoring in unemployment levels is no longer something they're allowed to do after this government reversed that mandate when they came into power. The Prime Minister sacrificed thousands of jobs, which impacts how fast wages grow and forced people to spend more money, which factor into yesterday's decision. And it should also probably be pointed out that this is a decision that'll take at least 6 months to a year to actually see any major impact on the economy, other than knowing that our GDP is going to drop substantially, so we're looking at an ongoing recession.